Good evening and welcome to Quorum. I'm Stephen Caranda. More than 20,000 adults in Mississippi are behind bars. This ranks the state among the highest in the nation for people who are incarcerated. A recent Pew Center study shows 1 in 69 adult Mississippians are in prison. The state is expected to spend more than $300 million this fiscal year for corrections. Tonight, leaders of the Senate and House Corrections Committees talk about the issues of crime and punishment and the impact on the state's funding crisis. We welcome to the program Senator Willie Simmons, who's the chairman of the Corrections Committee. He's from Cleveland and represents District 13 in Bolivar, Humphreys, and Sunflower counties. Senator Simmons is serving his 16th year in the legislature. Also with us is Senator Lydia Chassaniol. Senator Chassaniol is member of the Corrections Committee. She's from Winona and represents District 14 in Attala, Carroll, Grenada, LaFleur, Montgomery, and Tallahatchie counties. Senator Chassaniol is serving her 2nd year in the legislature. From the House, we have Representative Bennett Malone, chairman of the House Corrections Committee. Representative Malone is from Carthage and represents District 45 in Leake, Neshoba, Rankin, and Scott counties. He's serving his 29th year in the legislature. And Representative Tracy Arinder, serving his 5th year in the legislature. He's vice chairman of the House Corrections Committee. Representative Arinder is from Morton, representing District 75 in Scott County. Welcome to all of you to Quorum. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Tonight's conversation will focus on the costly business of keeping people in prison. What would you like to see improved in the corrections system? You may join the discussion tonight. The toll-free number from anywhere in Mississippi is 1-877-405-5247. That's 1-877-405-5247. You may begin calling us with your questions for our guests. For those of you on the internet, you can email your questions to quorum@mpbonline.org. Also, tonight's Quorum program is being simulcast on MPB Radio. I'd also like to add, for those of you on Twitter, you can follow MPB on Twitter by going to our website, mpbonline.org. I'd like to start with something that's been ongoing, the cigarette tax negotiations. Both chambers have passed a tax increase, the House 82 cents, the Senate 31 cents. I just wanted to get briefly from all four of you your opinions on the tax and what you'd like to see happen. Representative Malone, go ahead.
Well, of course, the House has passed $1 a pack on cigarettes. I voted for it in order to keep it alive, keep it going through the system. After I got to thinking about it, I'm not quite sure I'm even going to vote for any tax on cigarettes. After the federal government has put their tax on, I'm getting a lot of complaints from citizens about a pack of cigarettes. So it's in the system. We're negotiating with the Senate now, and we'll just have to see how it turns out.
Representative Arinder, what are your thoughts? Is the federal tax playing into it for you?
It is. In fact, I hadn't anticipated that happening until it did happen. As Chairman Malone said, we did pass a 82-cent a pack increase, which would increase it to $1 versus what the Senate version was of 49 cents total, I think. So I think we will, I fully believe that we'll wind up somewhere between $1 and 49. I don't know where that'll be, probably around 60, 55, 60 cents. I do not know the facts, but I just fully believe that's what's going to happen.
And Senator Simmons, it was, I believe, a 31-cent increase for a total of 49 the Senate passed, and also with some of that money going to help offset car tag costs for people. What are your thoughts on the bill that the Senate passed?
Well, I'm for increasing the cigarette tax. The federal government has increased tax. We are one of the lowest in the state at about 18 cents. We have so many needs, especially in the healthcare area, and as we look at education and other things. I do not personally support giving it to or using it for license plates. I think we ought to use it for Medicaid and other health care needs that we have in the state, because even once the stimulus money is gone, we're going to have a need for continuing funding of Medicaid. So to raise the tax and use that money for that purpose, I think is a good reason to do so.
Senator Chassaniol, what are your thoughts? Where would you like to see that money possibly go?
Well, you know, I don't have any counties in my district that abut a state, one of our neighboring states, but there are other people in the Senate whose districts are either on the Louisiana line or Tennessee or Alabama, and they have real concerns that if the increase is too great, that we will see a reverse of what's happening right now, because Tennessee placed a very high tax on their cigarettes, people are coming across the state line and purchasing cigarettes in Mississippi because it is, as Chairman Simmons just pointed out, a lesser tax. And cigarettes are a commodity. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether people should smoke or not. They're unavailable to anyone under the age of 18. I personally do not smoke, but I know a lot of people who do, and I think the people who are in the districts near our adjoining states are very concerned that perhaps if we raise the tax too high, that it's going to create a reverse situation where people will be going from Mississippi over into Alabama or to Louisiana or to Tennessee, and they will be buying not just cigarettes, but they'll purchase other things, gasoline perhaps, or groceries. So, you know, if it's a commodity for us to regulate, I think we need to be realistic about the tax that we place on a commodity.
And some of the representatives mentioned their concern over the federal government tax now coming into play. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a consideration as well. Of course, federal tax is going to affect everyone, not just Mississippi. It will affect our neighboring states as well. But I just think we need to be good stewards of tax money. And if it is a commodity that we are to regulate, then I think we must consider it a commodity, even though it is one that is bad for people's health.
One thing that we talked about opening the show is Mississippi's high incarceration rate, obviously. We're talking about Corrections Committee tonight, with around 1 in 69 adults behind bars and more than 20,000 in the state behind bars. For you two in the House, Representative Malone, does that high number concern you? What are your thoughts on it?
Concerns me very much that we're number 2 in the nation in locking people up. You know, what makes the rest of the nation so bad and Mississippi and Louisiana so good? By the way, we trail Louisiana.
Louisiana is number 1, that's correct.
I think that we're probably going to have to do some long, hard looking at some of the penalties for the crimes. We're going to have to come to alternatives to incarceration for the nonviolent offender. We have a lot of young people that got caught with small amount of drugs that are behind bars training how to be a better criminal. Mm-hmm. Because they got older people in there that's teaching them every day how to do it. I believe that the legislature is going to have to look at something more like intensive supervision, where you can put a bracelet on that inmate, let him go to school or go to work, and we'll know where he's at all times. Then if he violates again, we can pick him right back up. But the taxpayers of this state cannot continue to pay. I think our budget, Senator, is $385 million this year, and we can't continue to pay those kind of taxes.
It seems like you two in the Senate are agreeing with what Representative Malone was saying. What would you two like to see happen with some of the corrections issues that we're facing that lead to these high numbers of people incarcerated?
Well, a few years ago, I think it was in 1995, we made what I consider to be a terrible mistake when we put in place the 85% rule for all offenders, regardless to the offense, whether it was violent or nonviolent. That caused our population to grow tremendously, and it's put us in a position where we are second in the nation. We can't afford to do that. Last year, working with Chairman Malone in the House, Representative in the Senate, we were able to pass legislation that has helped to curtail the growth. We are seeing more and more offenders get out of the system through the parole board system as a result of that. We also have in the hopper this year a bill, intensive supervision, which is going to allow another 1,200 or so inmates to participate in that program, and they will be on house arrest. So those kind of programs, community programs that we have in place and that we can grow to cause more and more offenders to get out of the system that costs so much for the state to incarcerate them, is where we need to go. It's many of our individuals that we can do early kind of interventions on. We find that if we educate our citizens, they have a tendency not to become incarcerated. So we got to do more at early intervention in the education system and for real kind of programs to keep individuals out of the correction system.
We've got a caller touching on an issue we were just talking about. Robert from Vicksburg, go ahead with your question. Are you there, Robert? Can you hear me? We may not have Robert from Vicksburg. Getting back to the issue we were just talking about, some new correction strategies. Senator Chassaniol, what's your thoughts on looking at some of these issues that might be able to bring more people into community-based correction?
Well, listening to what Chairman Simmons was saying, it's true that in 1995, when our budget was about $107 million a year for corrections, the 85% law, which I think does have a reasonable application for violent offenders. When it was across the board for nonviolent offenders as well as violent offenders, escalated our budget in corrections up to $327 million last year, and I think the figure you just quoted was $385 million this year, which is a phenomenal amount of money. We've obviously got to be better stewards of public money, as well as finding a way to serve the correction system so that people are hopefully rehabilitated. 95% of these people are coming back into society. So while we have them in the corrections facilities, we need to teach them something either through drug and alcohol intervention or to work with them on their education prospects and some job training. And all of these things, I understand from talking with Chairman Simmons, are all possibilities that we're working on.
And Representative Arinder, when you're looking at these issues as a member of the Corrections Committee, does the tight budget we're facing this fiscal year make you think about them any differently?
It certainly does make me think about it differently, and I would completely agree with Chairman Malone and Chairman Simmons. We are number 2 in the nation in incarceration, and in fact, to bring those numbers a little bit closer in line, we have about 29,000 so locked behind bars, somewhere in that neighborhood, and about that many more either on parole or house arrest. And I would love to see, as Chairman Malone and Chairman Simmons, would love to see more people, nonviolent offenders, put on house arrest. Now, some people think house arrest is just a party, but about 40 or 50%, maybe 60% of the people that's placed on house arrest wind up back incarcerated because it is so an intense program that they keep such in close watch on these people, but at least they get a chance to prove themselves. And so I would love to see more of that done on nonviolent first-time offenders.
There's been recently a couple cases from the parole board that have been making news. In one, the state parole board voted to release a man convicted of raping and murdering a University of Mississippi student more than 20 years ago. And the Senate passed a bill to make it more difficult to release felons. Senator Simmons, what did that bill do, and what are your thoughts on it?
We are looking at, we have a bill in the system to address the issue as far as DNA and looking at some other things. We have, but what I want to say is that we have what I consider to be a good parole system. We have 5 outstanding Mississippians serving on the parole board, and it is one of the probably the most difficult jobs that you could have in the state of Mississippi. In addition to that of the Commissioner of Correction, those individuals have to take a look at each and every offender. They are looking at more and more offenders now because of the new programs that we have in place, and they have to make a decision based upon that. So while we want to make sure that they aren't releasing individuals who are going to be a threat to society, we know that they understand that and that they're going to do everything they possibly can to make sure that they, when they review an offender record and look at his or her behavior, they're going to make a decision that they have to live with themselves each day and night as they go to bed, wondering whether or not that person or any of those persons they have released is going to create a problem in society. So we think we have a pretty good system, and we want to consider that system continue to work because that is the only exit valve that we have to the correction system in order to try and curtail the population as the judicial system put individuals into the correction system.
And Senator Chassaniol, am I correct? You're a former member of the parole board?
Yes, that is correct.
So what is the system then that you used to go through when you were considering to parole someone who's been convicted?
When a person is eligible for parole consideration, it's changed just slightly because at one time we were assigned to specific congressional districts. Now I think the members are all at large. But when I was a member of the State Parole Board, I would meet with the family members of victims. I would meet with the family members of inmates. And through the interview process, as well as reviewing the inmate's file, the sort of behavior he had exhibited while incarcerated, any efforts this inmate had made to improve himself, either through drug and alcohol treatment, through working within the prison. You know, there are jobs that are available for inmates to participate in. That was sort of the way we prepared ourselves. And then we would report back to the other members of the board before we voted. Sometimes we met individually with the inmates, not always, but if there was a case where we felt that it would benefit the inmate and the parole board to meet with him, we would go to the penitentiaries and we would meet with that person before we made our final decision. So all of our deliberations were on the front end. We were always looking and trying to find out everything that we could to make an educated decision, and I can assure you none of them were made without a lot of deliberation and consideration.
And if I'm understanding the Senate bill correctly, there are 5 members on the parole board, and this bill would require all 5 of them unanimously to vote in some cases. Now, is it just a simple majority?
Well, there's a...
Yes, sir. You explain it to them.
There is an amendment that was put in the bill to say that we should perhaps have a unanimous vote on certain crimes. The current statute calls for a majority of the vote. We don't ever know because it's really not an open or a record that we look at. We don't really know what the numbers is when the parole board meets and to make a decision. So if they come and say that the parole board has made a decision, we don't know whether it's 3 or 5. And we really haven't questioned that until this particular case that you spoke of earlier occurred. And some of the senators are very interested in knowing, and perhaps some of the House members, whether we should increase that number on certain crimes or not. And that's something we'll be looking at in Compass.
I'd like to talk to the House members about this issue also, but first we have a caller, Bonnie from Starkville. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, I just wanted to ask and get the thoughts of the senators there, representatives, on drug court. It's been approved in several counties in Mississippi, and I feel like it's a great program, closely monitored, lasts as long as 18 months. And a lot of counties don't want the drug program going on in their county. I just want to get their thoughts on that.
Thanks for the call, Bonnie. For you two in the House, what are your thoughts on the drug court issue?
Well, I think it's a wonderful program. It's right now voluntary on part of the judge, but more and more judges are seeing that if they, this is a way to save money and a way to help rehabilitate some of these people. And I think you're going to see an increase in drug courts, and we certainly are encouraging because it's a tough course. Actually, I've seen inmates that couldn't make it through the course and go on to prison. It's just that tight, just that tough.
And for you two in the Senate, is this one of the other things you're considering as you're looking at some of the new correction strategies?
Well, one of the drug court is one of the better programs that we have. It's been proven to be effective. It is on a voluntary basis, and judges have to make decisions as to whether or not, circuit court judges have to make decisions as to whether or not they want to use it. I am an advocate for it, and whatever we can do to help grow it, we certainly want to see the judges do so. It's not a lack of funds from what I understand, it's just judges just haven't decided to utilize the program more.
I just wanted to get back to what we were just talking about, the parole board issue in Mississippi. For you two in the House, what are your thoughts on the parole board? Is it currently working? Does it need some updating? Representative Malone?
Well, as you know, we, back a few years ago, I introduced a bill and we got it passed to go from a 3-member part-time board to a 5-member full-time board, and that has proven very beneficial. No system's perfect. I don't care what it is, but I would like to repeat at what Senator Simmons has said. They have done an outstanding job over there, especially in the last 12 months. They've had a very heavy caseload. I understand it was 3-2 vote on releasing the offender. But every system's they're gonna make a mistake at one point in time. So that's just one of those we're gonna have to live with, but I can promise you it's keeping those parole board members on their toes.
And Representative Arinder, what are your thoughts? Do you think there's any way we can improve the system?
I think so. I agree with both the chairmen, especially with the bill coming up. If I have the opportunity, I think I'll vote to have unanimous consent a unanimous vote on certain offenses, the same as it took to convict that person. It takes a unanimous consent to convict a person, and I would love to see that same vote on paroling that person.
And Senator Chassaniol, just to talk to you again, this bill would also allow some public comment. Was there public comment when you were on the board that would play into the issue, or were you mostly talking to, you mentioned the victims' families and the convicted families?
Well, when there are very sensitive cases, there's always going to be a certain amount of publicity surrounding it, and frequently the victims' families are the ones who are giving interviews to the press, and so naturally there's going to be a certain amount of public comment that arises from their comments that they make. I think that the thing the parole board has to do is insulate itself if it's going to do an effective job, because you can't just go willy-nilly with whichever way the wind is blowing. It's got to be taken as a serious and very dedicated attempt to make the best choices possible. You know, as the chairman said, this is one way that we are able to use something in the corrections business, and it is a business because it's very expensive, to give the corrections officials a way of monitoring the behavior of inmates. Inmates who have a possibility of parole will try harder to have a good record of behavior in the penitentiary. It gives the guards something to use, because after all, these folks, as Commissioner Epps likes to say, none of them are in prison for singing too loudly in the church choir. So it's a very serious business. And as Chairman Malone just pointed out, for the past 12 months particularly, the parole board has been working heroically, because we have, through legislation, allowed more people to be reviewed by the board. And so it is a serious matter. It is a way to help save financially for the state, but it is also a way to hopefully help people correct themselves and where they've erred. And
just a final question on this issue. As someone who used to serve on the board, I mean, were these decisions ever easy? These were two high-profile cases. For you, was there always someone who was disappointed with the decision of the parole board?
Well, as I have told Chairman Simmons, you know, every time we made a decision, someone was unhappy, either the victim's family, whether it was a violent crime or if it was a theft or whatever. There was always someone that was unhappy if we voted to parole. And if we voted not to parole, oftentimes the inmate's family were equally disappointed, and sometimes, you know, you could feel a lot of pressure either way. So it's a difficult decision, and I have a lot of respect for the people who currently serve on the board and for the job they're doing.
Let's bring another caller into this. Regina from Greenville, go ahead with your question.
I am here. We realize that inmates aren't, or actually offenders are not in prison just for good behavior, but generally when they make calls, they must play through Global Tel-Link, and the charge is 5 times that of any other prison system in America. And their in-state friends and families are charged 32 cents per minute and 88 cents per minute to the calls outside of the state. And the average rate, according to the FCC, is just 6 cents. I'm just wondering what it is we can do, because it places an unfair financial burden on their families and friends, and then really has them so disconnected that they might not have any rapport with their family after they're released.
Thanks for the call. I think the issue Regina is touching on is one of the contracts for phones in the prisons. Representative Malone, what's the situation there? Her concern is that that's too expensive.
Well, it is expensive, but as you know, technology that we have nowadays, it's expensive, and we take a lot of a great deal of that money is turned and spent back on inmate welfare funds for the inmates, and a portion of it then goes into the farming operation. I believe it don't, Senator. So none of it comes to the state of Mississippi. It's all it's used for the benefit of the inmate. I don't know. I have no idea whether the rates could be reduced or not, but it's put up for bids ever so often. So, you know, it'll come up for bid one day.
For you two in the Senate, Regina was talking about this was a way for inmates to remain connected with their families. Do you two think this is an issue that maybe should get some more attention?
Department of Correction has always, I won't say always, but in recent years has had and has made an attempt, similar to what Senator Chassaniol was speaking of, in the way of managing its offenders, to create privileges and opportunities for the offenders to engage and be involved with their families. We have visitation programs. We have cognitive visits for the offenders and families, and the telephone. The telephone calls are very, very expensive. Those calls are made during the time of the day when the highest rate is in place. It is a contract that we let out, and as Chairman Malone indicated, some of those funds do go back to assist the offenders in various programs and provide educational materials and things to them. But it's an expensive privilege that those offenders have. But in addition to that, the Department of Correction has to make sure that they do everything possible to provide adequate security and that they unallow offenders to talk or utilize the telephone communication system to create a problem or create dangers for the staff and other offenders. So it is an expensive privilege, I have to say, and one I'm not really sure that we can reduce, because when you look at other facilities, whether it be state, federal, or county jails, you're basically going to have the same kind of system and the same kind of costs associated with those costs.
We've got Marcia in Jackson on the phone. Marcia, go ahead with your question.
Thank you kindly. I want to thank each of the panelists and the moderator for your public service. And then I wanted to ask a question about an expansion of the restitution centers. I've worked with the inmates both when they were in work situations for pay and in situations for community service. So I think they're very good ways to help rehabilitate inmates, and wonder if there's a future for some expansion.
Thanks for the call, Marcia. Representative Malone, restitution centers, what are they?
Definitely. Restitution centers is just where they can go out and work, earn some money, and pay back their the person they violated. You're going to see more of that. In fact, we have already expanded that program, and we're working on some programs over in the House now to open other facilities, not just incarceration, but expand programs. The only problem that we've got right now is getting them jobs. You know, we can't let them compete with the private sector, and there's only so many jobs out there. But we're having a high success rate with it, and I think it's the wave of the future.
Restitution centers for you two in the Senate, something we should be looking at a little bit more?
Most definitely. Restitution is a great program. All parties benefit with the restitution center. The offender is able to find employment, creates additional skills so that when he or she is released, will be able to go into a job. But in addition to that, while they're in the system, they are able to pay the victim and actually engage the victim and give the victim some relief for the crime in which they committed. They also put monies away when they get ready to release, so that when they exit the system, they have some funds. So, and then they pay for their stay in the restitution center. So the state doesn't have the same kind of costs associated with a restitution center they would have with some of the other facilities. So, like Chairman Malone indicated, it is something we need to look at more and more in the future. We do have to be concerned, because one of the requirements for a restitution center is that those offenders must be able to work in the community and hold a job that pays. And with the economic situation being what it is now, it makes it a little bit more challenging for us to be able to do that.
Let me add just
go ahead.
A little bit to that. We being Senator Simmons and his committee and our committee and Commissioner Epps, we've sat down and worked a plan out. We're fixing to open a center, what that we call a reentry program. Now, we have a lot of inmates that have done their time. They flat-timed it. They've served all their time, but the law reads you can't be paroled in Mississippi unless you have a residence in Mississippi to be paroled to. So we're sitting up here with about 100 and some odd inmates that are just sitting there under the air condition, We're feeding them, clothing them, doctoring them. They have nowhere to go. So we're opening a restitution center sometime, probably this month, over in Walnut Grove. Tyson and Pico has given jobs to these inmates, and they will work and earn prevailing wage. Then they'll go back and pay their room and board back to the state. I don't know what that'll be, but somebody will determine it. And then whatever they have left over will go into an account for them for when they do find a residence to go to. So that's going to help a lot.
I just wanted to add, for those of you listening on MPB radio and online, we're talking with leaders of the House and Senate Corrections Committee, Senator Willie Simmons, Lydia Chassaniol, Representatives Bennett, Malone, and Tracy Arinder. You may call us with your questions at 1-877-405-5247 or email them to quorum@mpbonline.org. And we're also taking Twitter questions. I'd like to bring Jesse and Brandon onto the show. Jesse, are you there? Go ahead with your question.
Yes. I'm wondering if you've got an inmate that is supposed to be released in, say, 15 months, he's got a place to go, and he has already been told he could have a job, and he's done his 30 for 30 and all the programs that they have to be released. Is there any other way that he might could be released earlier than that with this other program that they're trying to get early releases?
Thanks for the call, Jesse. I think what she was touching on, what we were just talking about, restitution centers. She was using the example of someone who has got about 15 months left on their sentence. Does restitution centers, Senator Simmons, play into the issue of how soon some of these inmates can be released?
Restitution is the example that Chairman Malone was given in this particular program. It is kind of an exit program out. Most of your restitution are not necessarily an exit program, but they are a program that offenders are assigned to who are nonviolent offenders. The situation she's speaking of, I'm not really sure how that person, the parole board, if this person is eligible for parole and the parole board has looked at them, then the parole board has to go through certain steps and making sure that they have residence, looking for employment and other kind of things. And then that individual will exit the system. They try not to. The parole board working with the Department of Correction, they try not to keep an offender past his or her actually eligibility date for parole. They look at them before the eligibility date and then exit them as soon as possible.
Cases are usually heard 2 months, I think, prior to their potential exit date.
So I would need a little bit more information on the case that she's speaking of in order to...
Senator, there's one more possibility. Of course, we don't know what classification or anything this gentleman is. But if he's within 15 months of parole date, he could qualify. He could go before the House Arrest Committee and be looked at and maybe placed on house arrest. So that's a possibility for the lady to consider.
We've got an email here from Miles, who asks, why not legalize marijuana already? I'd like for each of your panel members to answer the question, do you feel someone should spend time behind bars for simply possessing marijuana? Representative Arinder, what are your thoughts on that issue?
I don't know much about marijuana. In fact, I don't know anything about marijuana. Other than it's an illegal drug, that's about all I can tell you.
Representative Malone, what are your thoughts?
Well, of course, I think that they should serve sometime. But now I will say this. I think that a lot of the judges are going way too far, especially with this first-time marijuana offender. He needs to be put in the system. We used to call it shock probation. Put him in there, let him learn what it's all about. Let him see that prison life is not really what he wants. And then we're developing programs and have developed some educational programs, work programs, he's not a true criminal. You know, young people make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And it just so happened he committed a felony. We don't want, if you keep him in there too long, you're going to make a real criminal out of him. So if you give him a taste of prison life and then give him a chance to come out and show that he can be a good citizen, I think that's a better approach to it.
For you two in the Senate, Miles here, I believe, feels that we're sending too many people to prison here in Mississippi because of marijuana possession. Senator Simmons, what are your thoughts on that issue?
Well, there are two schools of thoughts on it. In the early and mid-'60s, there were probably individuals who sat around a similar table as we sit around and debated and discussed whether alcohol should be legalized in the state of Mississippi. And eventually, the citizen and the policymakers came to the decision that alcohol should be legalized because, I guess, citizen was consuming it anyway. So there's still debate on whether or not marijuana should be legalized, and there's some good arguments for it and there's some good arguments against it if it's done, I guess, in a certain way. The issue is, as far as individuals being sentenced and serving time, we have tried to address that. Last year we attempted to, we did pass a bill that increased the amount of drugs and or marijuana that a person could be in possession of and be eligible for parole. Because at one point, we basically said if you were involved in any kind of drug offense, you could not be released on parole, and it made it very difficult. And we had individuals that we was choosing to put or incarcerate as opposed to allowing them to go to Jackson State or Mississippi State or one of our universities. That bill helped relieve that, and as a result of that, the parole board is now looking at 600 plus inmates a month, many of them that fall into that category. So we're also looking at this intensive supervision program and kind of easing up on the drug offenses that are included in that. So we are aware of that, and we are also aware that oftentimes if those individuals are able to get some kind of treatment and go through some programs, they will be able to be productive citizens as opposed to being incarcerated and costing them a whole lot of money to incarcerate.
Senator Chassaniol, do the laws here in Mississippi need some tweaking, in your opinion?
Well, you know, I agree with everything that's been said so far. Having that in mind, I want to also say that any sort of drug use can be a slippery slope. Marijuana is seen as somewhat of an entry-level drug that young people just sort of dabble with. You don't see many old potheads, but a lot of young people, it's an experimentation thing, which we know a lot of young people do. But it concerns me that we might pass laws that would encourage people to engage in behavior that's going to possibly lead them to stronger and more addictive drugs than marijuana. Some people say, what's the harm in it? Well, if one day it's marijuana, the next day it could be heroin. So, you know, and it's just something I think we want to encourage people to engage in behaviors that could ruin their lives, ruin their families' lives. I'd have to think long and hard about lessening the laws, the punishment. I agree with Chairman Simmons that sometimes it's not a good idea to keep people incarcerated too long, just as Chairman Malone said, because they only learn from hardened criminals if they are incarcerated with people who've been there for a long time.
We were talking earlier in the show about new policing strategies, or rather correction strategies, possibly more community-based services, and we have an email on this issue from James, who says he would like to know what the panel thinks is a good number of offenders for a parole or probation officer to be supervising. I know for a fact some parole officers have a caseload of 175 to 200 offenders. There's no way parole officers can supervise that many offenders. Public safety needs to be first on the legislature's mind. For you two in the House, as you're considering these strategies, maybe more community-based services, do you have to also look at this issue? How many people are being supervised?
We've got to look at it very closely. No doubt about our supervisors are overworked and understaffed. What the answer to that is, at this point in time, we've not come up with. Of course, normally when you're short of money, you know, nothing gets done. But the caseload for these people is just, it's outrageous. And we're either going to have to hire some additional officers, which we have increased some fees to do. And I think that Commissioner Epps will probably hire some additional. But that's not the long-term answer to it. But it's probably the short-term answer that we're going to give it this year.
And in the Senate, as you're looking at these community-based correction strategies, is this something you have to consider?
It is. I'm not really sure what the magic number is. It probably depends upon the kind of offenders as well as the area in which they have to cover, the geographic area. But part of the solution to it I think, and I think Senator Chassaniol and the representative will agree, is the ankle bracelet or the monitoring program that we're going to utilize with the intensive supervision or house arrest. Those programs are much more economical. In addition to that, the individual is monitored 24 hours a day. When he or she is out of range, the monitoring company knows it and can notify a parole officer. When he or she takes the ankle bracelet off, we know. So that monitoring device is something that we're going to have to look at more and more in the future to help offset the costs as we look at community.
We've got Crystal and Brandon on the phone. Crystal, go ahead with your question.
Well, my question is, I've got a husband in there, and he's got 7 years left. He said that he had mandatory time, but he works in prison. He tutors people in the prison, and I'm wondering if this new law could possibly allow him to be released early also.
Thanks for the call, Crystal. There are multiple things that come into play when they're looking at this issue, isn't it, Representative Malone? There's
a lot of things that they have to look at. We don't know what the nature of his crime was. I believe she said it was mandatory time. We have expanded to 30 for 30. Of course, it's in the conference right now. We're taking the earned good time, meritorious earned good time cap off if the House and Senate agrees to it. That might possibly help her husband some, but it's just according to really what he's in for.
That and what the when a judge goes to the extreme of writing mandatory in a sentence, then that order is kind of binding in the Department of Correction, or we don't really have a lot of wiggle room, so to speak. So again, it's a case that the department would have to look at and determine whether or not he or she would be eligible for in addition programs.
We've got an email here that doesn't have a name. Do your panelists really believe people in this state can or will pay between $50 and $60 a carton for cigarettes? Touching on the cigarette tax issue. I'm a nurse and I smoke. I feel I'm being discriminated against, therefore I will not pay that amount, even though I'm probably more in a position to. I really do not think you need to be spending all this money just yet. It sounds like, Senator Chassaniol, this is one of the people who may touch on a concern you were saying and possibly go out of state.
Well, I'm sure that, we don't have guards at our state line. People can cross from Mississippi into Louisiana or Alabama or Tennessee if they choose. And that's something that we will have to look at as we set the tariff on cigarettes or on any other product that people can buy. If it's a commodity and people wish to buy them, as this person continues to smoke, she will continue to buy this product. And if she's like me, I read the grocery circulars. Those are commodities, whether it's cornmeal or milk or whatever product. I'm going to probably go to the store that has the best value. So we have to consider that.
We've also got, for you two in the House, how do you sort of balance this act between maybe driving people out of state but also bringing up revenue?
Well, let me say this. I can almost assure you people are innovative in all over the world. But they're going to create black markets for cigarettes. You're going to have people that have regular routes that's going to go out of state, buy cheaper cigarettes, come back and resell them. I think that I'm just hoping that we can come with something better rather than just run the price of cigarettes out the roof to where it drives people to doing this.
We've actually got Lewis, a caller on this issue. Lewis, I don't know where you're calling from, but go ahead with your question.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say something. I'll let y'all talk about it, whatever. It's clearly discrimination when you take a group of people and you fine them for something that they do, like smoking in a sense. If you were to turn around right now and put a 60-cent sales tax on a can of Budweiser, you'd have every redneck in Mississippi wanting to kill them. So, I mean, it's clearly, it's easy to get on a bandwagon against smokers because most people don't smoke. I'm not saying smoking's good for you by any means, but neither is drinking. So,
thanks for the call, Lewis. Representative Arinder, Lewis is concerned maybe these people are being taken advantage of. What do you think?
I think so. I am a smoker, I'm not bragging about that, but I do smoke. And cigarettes are cheaper, depending on where you buy them right now. You can go in my own county or town, and there's as much as $1 a pack of difference depending on where you buy them right now. So I am concerned that cigarette smokers are being jumped on, and not alcohol and not gaming. Those are 3 issues that need to be looked at, and we are the second lowest state in the nation for cigarette taxes. But like I said before, I did not anticipate the federal government going up on their cigarettes. And they did, and now we're facing a possible cigarette tax increase. So, yes, I do think the cigarette smokers are being singled out, to answer your question.
Lewis also mentioned the possibility of raising taxes on alcohol. Did you, in the Senate, consider that this session?
We did not. I supported it. I have suggested, and in the past I have introduced legislation because I am a believer that I don't think we ought to single out the smoker only. We ought to increase the tax on smokeless tobacco. We should increase the tax on alcohol, and we should do some other things in order to make sure that we're able to provide quality health care for all of the citizens in the state, as well as a quality education. So to increase what is often referred to as sin tax, not just on cigarettes, but on alcohol as well. And I'm an advocate of, this is another show, but even looking at some of those exemptions that we have and taking some of the exemptions out so we have more money to take care of those kind of needs.
Obviously a complex issue. Getting back to the corrections issue, Francis, I believe, is calling on the corrections issue. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question is, while the inmates are incarcerated, they are serving their time for the crime. Should the prisoner's guard be allowed to use brutality against them, and what could be done?
Thanks for the call, Francis. Francis has some concerns that maybe guards are getting too rough with prisoners. Is that a common complaint that you hear, Senator, or Representative, rather?
It's not a common complaint. In fact, we're closely monitored by federal law, as well as ACLU. The guards, to my knowledge, and I would normally get a complaint just like Commissioner Epps would and Senator Simmons. There are just sometimes that an inmate's going to make a guard be rough. I mean, it takes that to handle them. So, you know, we certainly, in the training of our enforcement people, we certainly discourage them abusing an inmate, but they got to do their job.
Senator Chassaniol, do you think that the oversight in institutions on the levels of violence that may take place is enough here in Mississippi?
Well, Commissioner Epps has met with us on a number of occasions, and I feel like he is doing an excellent job in overseeing the quality of work that the guards do in our penitentiaries. I think our penitentiaries are very well run. I'm sure there are isolated incidents, as Chairman Malone just pointed out, where an inmate perhaps becomes uncontrollable and a guard must use force. I mean, they, after all, are felons who are in the penitentiary, and some of these people, I'm sure, because of either mental issues or because of the types of crimes they have committed, they're violent offenders. And so, you know, once again, we're not dealing with choir boys here. We're dealing with people who have committed serious offenses. I would not want to have the job that the guards have in our penitentiaries, because they have a very difficult job of trying to maintain order. And Commissioner Epps does an excellent job, I believe. And as Chairman Malone and Chairman Simmons have said, you know, this is a very delicate issue, but it's one where order must be maintained. Otherwise, you're going to have pandemonium.
The caller used the word allowed to abuse, and the answer to that is no. It is not tolerated. We have had employees who were terminated and employees who was looked at for possible prosecution for abusing and violating the rights of offenders. The Mississippi correction system went into a lawsuit, Gates versus Collier, as a result of the abuse of offenders many, many years ago. And we stayed under that court order until around 1993 or so, when we were able to get out from under it. So Mississippi is, and Commissioner Epps grew up in the system, and he's very aware of that. So to respond to her question, is abuse allowed by the officers? No. There may be some exceptions to the case, but when that is proven to be the case, then that officer will be dealt with.
Representative Arinder, how concerned are you with this issue of the possibility of violence in our institutions here in Mississippi?
I rarely hear of any occasion that that's happened, but I have heard of it. And I agree with Chairman Simmons that it's not tolerated, but our officers have to defend themselves when the time comes up. If it takes 1, 2, 3, or ever how many officers it takes, they've got to maintain order. Commissioner Epps is responsible for 50-something thousand people incarcerated or either on parole or either on house arrest. And he has to maintain control of those prisons, and if he don't, it'll be total chaos. So we have to maintain control, and if sometimes it takes not abuse, we don't tolerate that, and he don't tolerate that. But if it takes manhandling somebody, then that's what needs to be done.
We've got another caller, Sue Ellen from Tylertown. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question is, why doesn't the prison, why don't they offer programs for sex offenders, like rehabilitation programs, and why aren't they separated accordingly as far as like, why aren't they separated, like rape, people that actually rape somebody be in one part, and people that hadn't made such a severe, crime, why do they have to be mixed together?
Thanks for the call, Sue Ellen. Senator Simmons, what do you think of her concerns about there not being maybe enough rehabilitation for people?
We have to answer one part of our question. We have a great classification system that take a look at the offenders when they arrive going through Central Mississippi, where they are diagnosed and they are analyzed and looked at, and then the Department of Correction try and assign those offenders based upon a lot of things that are taken into consideration. We don't have the luxury of being able to separate them to the level in which she had inquired about.
It's just a matter of resources, isn't it? Limited amount of space.
Exactly. But the classification system is there to try and assign an offender based upon his or her particular need, as well as how do we go about protecting. There is a significant number of programs in place. The alcohol and drug program. We don't have a sex program that I know of in place. We have psychiatrists, psychologists, case managers who do counseling with those offenders, but not necessarily a unit designated for sex offenders, no.
Representative Malone, looking at the rehabilitation of sex offenders, this is something you have to take into account when you're focusing on more community-based services, isn't it?
Very definitely. It's not a proven fact that you can rehabilitate a sex offender. I mean, 9 out of 10 people that you talk to, that's why they serve mandatory with they don't get any reduction in their sentences. Most of the experts tell us that once a sex offender offends, he's going to do it again if he gets a chance. And it's just, there's not a lot of sentiment to be soft on a sex offender. I'll just be honest with you. They're treated right. They're treated like human beings, but I'm afraid they're gonna be there to serve their sentence like they're supposed to.
We've been talking a lot about the cost, more than $300 million a year. What are some of the costliest areas inside the prison, Senator Simmons? Where do a lot of these costs go? Is health care, I've heard, is that an increasing cost?
Medical is probably the leading cost as far as big costs. Then it depends upon which classification you have the offenders in when you get into our maximum security units, because of the number of offenders and the kind of facility that you have to have. That is a very costly unit to operate. So when we look at the various systems that we have the Department of Corrections, state-operated systems, we have our community work centers, and we have the private facilities and the regional facilities. You don't have a lot of private companies coming in and say, give me all of your maximum securities, because, again, that is a costly offender to manage. So it just depends upon what it is. But I would say medical and your maximum security units are where your big costs. And then, of course, personnel is always going to be a big burden on the Department of Correction, because you have to have all kinds of staff. You become a community in itself as far as the staff that you can have to have, going all the way from medical all the way down to your security staff and the maintenance and all that you have to run the system.
It sounds like there's a lot of cost in the system to be considered, but unfortunately that's all the time we have for tonight's program. I'd like to thank our guests, Senators Willie Simmons and Lydia Chassaniol, and Representatives Bennett, Malone, and Tracy Arinder. We also thank you for joining our discussion tonight. We invite you to tune in next week at 7 for Quorum. You may view tonight's program on our website beginning tomorrow. That address is mpbonline.org. I'm Stephen Caranda. Good night.